Oh, goodness gracious, I think the greatest testament to Western civilization might be centralized air conditioning. But good morning. My name is Dr. Meaghan Mobbs, though I say doctor with some caution. If my teenage daughters were here, they would jokingly tell you I am simply a doctor of feelings. But I also stand before you as the daughter of two military veterans. My mother was one of the first women to go to airborne school and later deployed to Grenada. My father commanded the famed 82nd Airborne Division and was in the Pentagon on September 11th. So I grew up in a home where the walls told stories. One painting in my teenage bathroom depicted the Battle of Nijmegen during Operation Market Garden in World War II. Yes, you heard that right. Interior decorators we were not. But it showed men of the 82nd Airborne Division crossing the Vaal River under German fire, paddling in canvas boats toward a bridge that had to be taken if a continent was to be liberated. The operation would later be remembered as a bridge too far, a phrase that has become synonymous with noble ambition that exceeded the limits of circumstance. But in my home, that painting was never presented as a monument to failure. It was a monument to the attempt. It taught me that there are moments in history when free people do not get to calculate only the odds of success. They must also measure the cost of doing nothing. Another painting in our dining room depicted the Battle of Little Round Top at Gettysburg during our Civil War. Not exactly the best prescription for digestion, but there, exhausted and nearly out of ammunition, the 20th Maine held the far left flank of the Union line. If they broke, the line would collapse. So the order came, fix bayonets. And those men, with almost nothing left, charged down the hill to victory. Gettysburg was not proof of American innocence. Brother fought brother over the greatest moral rupture in our national life. And yet, in that terrible battle, there was also evidence of something extraordinary, a nation capable of bleeding for its own correction. That was the story of the West I inherited. Not perfection, striving. Not innocence, repentance, courage, sacrifice, and the stubborn belief that human beings are made for more than submission to government. That is why I believe the West has been the greatest force for liberty, human dignity, and the freedom of women in the history of the world. That sentence should not be controversial. The fact that it often is tells us something about the condition of our culture. Yet we gather here under the theme of Reconstruction. I love that word because it refuses despair. We are not here to manage decline. We are not here to preside gracefully over the exhaustion of the West. We are here because something has been broken, but something can still be rebuilt. I went to West Point because I wanted to defend my country. I became a paratrooper and jumped out of perfectly good airplanes because good judgment develops later in life. I earned my PhD in psychology because I wanted to understand why men go to war. I became a humanitarian because I saw people defending the frontiers of freedom and I could not look away. And at some point, I found myself working in policy, including for brilliant leaders like Governor Glenn Youngkin. Sir, I don't think you're still in the crowd, but thank you for believing in me. But it was in those worlds, moving between war, psychology, policy, motherhood, and the long aftermath of conflict that I learned something I now believe with my whole heart. Yes, the pen is mightier than the sword, but the story is more powerful than both. A civilization can survive hardship, poverty, war, grave mistakes, if it retains the moral courage to correct them. What it cannot survive is the loss of its own story. And I worry that we are failing to tell the right story to women in the West. We have decided to tell women a story of suspicion toward the very civilization that made their freedom possible. We have taught too many girls to see marriage as confinement, motherhood as diminishment, patriotism as foolishness, faith as a threat, and inherited obligation as something from which sophisticated people are meant to emancipate themselves. The freedoms women enjoy in the West are not the default condition of human history. They are rare, they are fragile, they were built over centuries, refined through struggle, defended at great cost, and now too often taken for granted by those who benefit from them most. Most women who have ever lived did not inherit safety, education, political voice, equal standing before the law, freedom of conscience, or the ability to shape the course of their own lives. But Western women do. That's our inheritance. That does not mean every Western woman's life is easy. It does not mean injustice has vanished. It does not mean gratitude requires silence about what still need repair. But it does mean that the house in which women's freedom lives was not built by accident, and it will not stand forever if the people inside it are taught only to resent the architecture. Civilizations have always asked their young men one question: would you die for this? But before that question can be answered, civilization must answer another: is this worth living for? And that question has always been answered in large part by women. Not because women are decorative symbols of national virtue, not because we exist to inspire men from a safe distance, but because women have always been among the primary agents of cultural transmission. The home, the family, the church, the school, the prayer, the songs, the stories told at the table and before bedtime, the habits of gratitude and restraint and duty that children absorb long before they can define them. These are not small things. They are where civilization becomes personal. I have learned the power of Western womanhood in strange and sacred places. I learned it at airborne school. On our first jump, I was supposed to be near the back of the stick. Like everyone else on their first jump, I was trying to look calm while internally making peace with God and gravity. Then the jump master unhooked me, walked me to the front, clipped me back in, and screamed in my ear, if I jumped first, there was no way the men behind me would refuse. There are moments when the courage of a woman becomes a summons to the men around her. I learned the sanctity of womanhood when I became a mother, when I brought life into the world and understood that creation is not an abstraction. The future is not first planned in institutions or debated in policy. It first arrives helpless, embodied, hungry, and placed in your arms. I learned the gift of womanhood. I learned the gift of womanhood as a psychologist, sitting across from hardened special forces veterans who wept not because I offered some brilliant clinical insight, but because compassion is itself a form of shelter. I learned the burden of womanhood in Afghanistan, where women and girls are denied basic rights because of their sex, where the female body itself is treated as a problem to be hidden, controlled, and punished. And I learned the danger of womanhood in Ukraine, where as a humanitarian, I saw what Russian occupiers had done to women and girls, where the violence was so grotesque that healing sometimes required not only trauma care, but gynecological reconstruction. So forgive me if I do not have patience for the idea that the West is uniquely cruel to women. The West is the reason why I stand here. It is the reason I could serve, speak, study, work, vote, worship, argue, mother, lead, and come before you without asking permission from the state or from a man who owns my future. This is not a claim that the West has no sins. It's a claim that the West has the moral vocabulary to name sin, the legal structure to correct injustice, and the civilizational humility to try again. That is worth defending. And so the better story for women must begin with a better account of freedom. Freedom is not escape. Freedom is not resentment. Freedom is not the endless multiplication of options without any account of what those options are for. Freedom, at its highest, is the capacity to choose the good and then bind ourselves to it with love. The freedom to make and keep promises, the freedom to build a family, the freedom to serve your nation, the freedom to pursue excellence without severing ourselves from obligation, the freedom to belong to people and places that can make demands on us because they have first given us meaning. The better story is that women were made for all of it. To give life, guard truth, build homes, shape nations, civilize power, and remind men that some things are worth dying for because they are first worth living for. One of the greatest lies of our age is that women are incidental to the fate of civilization. Our adversaries know better. Russia, China, Iran, they understand that women are not a niche constituency, a decorative demographic, or a moral accessory to the great questions of history. Women are strategic terrain. Women are the canary in the coal mine. Where women are free, educated, safe, and equal before the law, civilization is functioning. Where women are subjugated, silenced, erased, trafficked, or used as instruments of propaganda, civilization is failing. But as I said before, women are also the carriers of culture. And when the carriers of culture are captured by bad ideas and worse actors, civilization does not merely weaken itself, it begins to turn against. The very traits that make women indispensable to renewal can, when manipulated, become instruments of self-destruction. Empathy can be redirected, agreeableness exploited, the desire for harmony can be used to silence necessary truth. The instinct that we carry to protect the vulnerable can be captured by movements that redefine predators as victims and victims as inconveniences. If our compassion can be manipulated, then we must anchor it in truth. If our empathy can be captured, then we must recover moral clarity. And that recovery should not make women harder, colder, or less compassionate. It should make us more fully ourselves. A woman can build a home and shape a nation. She can hold a child and hold a line. A woman can love the West not because the West has never failed her, but because the West remains the civilization most capable of recognizing her dignity, protecting her freedom, correcting its sins, and giving her daughters a future. That is the work of Reconstruction before us. That is the better story. I began with the paintings in my parents' home, Nijmegen and Little Round Top. Men crossing a river under fire to help liberate a continent. Men charging down a hill so that a nation founded on liberty might not perish while still divided against itself. But those paintings are half the story. During that brutal river crossing, the commander, Julian Cook, a devout Catholic, loudly recited the Hail Mary to give courage to his men. Throughout the duration of the Civil War, John Chamberlain wrote endless letters to his beloved wife saying, "We fight for all the guarantees of what men should love, for the protection and permanence and peace of what is most dear and sacred to every heart." These men, in moments of great consequence and horrible danger, turned to their belief in women to give them strength and fortitude. That is why women are the West's greatest gift, and the West is the greatest gift to womanhood, because the West alone recognized her power and then gave her power purpose and meaning. The story isn't that women are victims of West. The story is that they are being the ones called to save it. Thank you.